Millions of years ago, Shinnok, one of the Elder Gods, turned on his fellow deities and invaded the Earth realm.
It's time for a showdown. For 18 years, the Mortal Kombat franchise has been a shining beacon in the fighter genre, continuing to show off each release what a fighting game should be. The original games were notable for their sprite-based graphics, generic ninjas with different colored outfits, and ludicrous levels of violence. But the more modern games have grown into something so much more, though they've certainly kept the ludicrous levels of violence. Created by Ed Boon and John Tobias, the basic premise of the Mortal Kombat universe revolves around various people from all walks of life, or afterlife in the case of some characters, from various realms created by the Elder Gods doing battle in tournaments that are designed to keep their realm safe from the others. Along the way, you'll either be helped or hindered by various deities, demons, heroes, and villains that over the years have become iconic enough to the point where some of them have earned movies, Halloween costumes, action figures, cartoon parodies, pop culture references, and even become household names. Can I name you more than one or two fighters from the Tekken series of games? Yes, because I was a fan ever since Tekken 3. Would anybody who never played those games in the arcade or picked up a copy for the PlayStation 2 know who they are? Probably not. During this and the next video I upload, I'm going to be showcasing the latest two entries in the Mortal Kombat franchise, both of which were referred to as the greatest game in the Mortal Kombat series, and I can definitely see why. Mortal Kombat 10 and Mortal Kombat 11 both feature stunning visuals, a healthy roster of playable characters, an intriguing story mode, clever dialogue between characters before fights, and satisfying, ultra-brutal gameplay with a level of gore that could make a medical examiner blush. But which one holds the title of the actual best? Watch this two-part review and comparison to find out. I'm Unreal, and this is a Series Showdown from an average gamer. Getting into Mortal Kombat 10 right away, when you first start the game, you're prompted to choose a faction to align yourself with. The factions presented to you are groups of players that battle for overall dominance, which can determine what kind of rewards the developers, NetherRealm Studios, want to bestow you with. To me, this is reminiscent of the Favor of the Gods mechanic from Guild Wars, or the World vs. World mechanic from either Guild Wars 2 or Warhammer Online. The players who conquer and maintain control in those games would determine whether or not you could do raids or if you'd get any kind of periodic rewards. Due to the fact that there is a sequel out, I chose a faction without much information, and in the grand scheme of things, if you treat this like your typical fighter game, you know, the type you play with a friend over some delivery pizza and nacho cheese Doritos with maybe some Mountain Dew to round everything out, it won't really matter. There are rewards to be had, yes, but a game that's played casually, where you really can't devote years of your life to this, unlike an MMO. The roster of characters is healthy, there are multiple fighting styles to choose from for each one of them, and you already start out with multiple costumes for each one. So my primary goal was to check out the story, see what it had to offer, and then move on to some exhibition fights to see what's what. The story follows Mortal Kombat lore, but with so many games having been released over the years, as a casual fan, it's hard for me to understand which set of events is canon and which isn't. Characters that had been decidedly bad or good in previous games either were switched or have the ability to switch by the time the story is done, which can be puzzling considering the story in this game only took me about 4 to 4.5 hours to complete. And if you've been playing the series long enough as a casual fan, or you haven't played any Mortal Kombat game in the last 10 years or so, you may even wonder why somebody who was clearly a human with superpowers is now suddenly a talking lizard that dresses himself. Yes, I'm looking at you, reptile. The basics are pretty straightforward. Earthrealm is in danger, the Elder Gods won't help you for some reason, Raiden is a demigod who wants to help you out, and a bunch of shifty characters with sharp teeth and bad manners want to destroy everybody. The story is neat considering how deep the lore actually goes, but you're only going to fully grasp it if you followed this through each and every game. Otherwise, you're going to be left with the cliff notes like I was. Throughout the story, you're forced to play as several different characters, with a few fights given to you for each one before moving on to the next. I actually like that you're made to explore the roster, where in previous games, I kinda tended to stick with one or two favorite characters and ignore everybody else. However, the inherent problem with this is that you're never going to be fully competent with any fighter that way, never mind be able to master any of them. This means that you'll constantly be pausing the game to go to the moveset list and trying to memorize a few memorable and cool-looking combos before you're finally able to do a fatality on somebody. And even then, if you're not quick and deliberate with your button presses, you'll just end up doing a lame leg sweep or a short jab to finish your opponent off, which isn't anywhere near as satisfying as doing a fatality. Controls are good, and they are laid out in a manner that makes sense, reminding me of the original Mortal Kombat games that I saw in arcades years ago. Combos, however, are difficult to memorize for a casual player, and you're not going to be an effective fighter against a high difficulty level AI opponent or a human opponent without committing that kind of stuff to memory. And unlike in past Tekken games that I played when I was younger, I didn't find an option to map a devastating move or combo to a single trigger or shoulder button to make things easier, like Bryan Fury's DDT or suplex moves. Some characters share some traits and similar powers, especially those who are descendants of older characters, like Cassie Cage or Jackie Briggs, but this in no way implies that there isn't a huge amount of diversity among characters. I found during my story mode adventures, however, that it usually made things a lot easier for me to have a character with either high-speed, rapid-fire strikes at close distance to keep your foe occupied, or somebody who could launch long-distance attacks where you were less vulnerable to throws or other grapples, such as Sub-Zero, Raiden, or Cassie Cage. The game brings back X-ray moves, which show off some particularly gruesome but strangely satisfying attacks that can turn the tide of battle with ease. Much like the Mortal Kombat reboot, this involves showing how bones break or how organs are impacted by powerful strikes or impaling objects. Speaking of which, similar to previous versions of the game, Mortal Kombat 10 does incorporate weapons to the game to try and break up the monotony of roundhouse kicks and uppercuts. Each character has 3 different playstyles, which you may choose prior to your match and can incorporate either magic or handheld weapons into the mix. Fatalities just seem to be getting more and more brutal and over the top each time I try a new entry in the series. They're gross. And usually they aren't going to be for folks that can't look at a horrible injury without looking away, or people who can't watch a medical operation on TV. But they're definitely the preferred way to put an exclamation mark at the end of a sentence that is your 2 to 3 round fight against your opponent. Visuals were great, and from the art design to the character models to the magic effects and some of the gore, everything is great looking and it runs buttery smooth. The game does have a built-in benchmarking tool to help you determine what the right detail levels should be for your computer setup, but I think the game is optimized really well overall from the get-go. The only criticism I have is that some of the gore effects aren't quite as realistic as they could be. When I see Sub-Zero rip somebody's torso in half, the defeated foe's insides look like an uncooked slab of sirloin steak, not a body full of all kinds of moving parts. But on the other hand, you perform a fatality with Scorpion, and what he does to your anatomy in that scenario is detailed much better. So it's a pretty minor criticism, but I have to mention something since no game is ever really perfect. Sound effects are satisfying to accompany the great visuals. Music isn't really anything memorable, and I've yet to hear the classic Mortal Kombat techno theme from years ago. The cast hired to do the voice acting has constantly changed over the years. I'm very satisfied though with the current cast, although I do miss Ed Boon, the series creator, performing the original "Get over here!" when you hit somebody with Scorpion's kunai in the chest. Replay value really depends on your taste in games. As I said earlier in my overview, this is a fighter game. It's not an MMO, despite the added PvP reward mechanic. You have the story, tower mode, some minigames, and multiplayer, which generally improves with each console generation. Tekken Tag Tournament added a different dynamic with having an available 4-person multiplayer setup, and I remember one of the older Mortal Kombat games for the PlayStation 2 having a create a character mode, which I absolutely loved. And it made it so I played the game quite a bit longer than any other entry in the entire series, which unfortunately has not returned. Other players have speculated that this is because of the potential of bringing an overpowered character into the online portion of the game with a ridiculous moveset or an offensive outfit. But if that's the only reason for not doing it, why not just restrict it to single-player mode only? Overall, I love this game, and clearly the developers still haven't lost their touch after so many years. This game could only really be one-upped by a proper sequel. And now we have one. But we'll have to talk about it and compare them properly during the next video. So stay tuned, everybody. So until part 2, I'm Unreal, and you've just watched part 1 of a Series Showdown from an average gamer.